We gather here on this fifth Sunday in Ordinary Time. And as I mentioned, the readings are very much about call and response. And so I want to say something about that, particularly the call to Isaiah, and the extraordinary encounter between Peter and Jesus and the fish. And finally end with our corporate call for each and every one of us to sanctity, to sainthood, and nothing less. The prophet Isaiah, it's a powerful story. It's a powerful image. I don't know about you, but I don't particularly like this idea of a hot ember being put on my mouth. But maybe it does reflect the fact that when we really become clear on who we are and the ways in which we need to change, it's going to be painful. And there's going to be a need for sanctification, for purification. And the image of fire is often one used in the church to try and speak about this call and the image of being transformed in holiness. Earlier on in that reading, of course, they have this trisagion, the holy, 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 which is where we get that part of our liturgy. So it's coming very specific from the prophet Isaiah. The challenge, of course, is if you read on, it goes really dark fast, because what Isaiah is planning on doing, I think God is already aware it's not going to work. The people aren't going to hear it. The people are not going to be purged. The people are not going to be sanctified. And the community will be dispersed in exile. Now, this is the same prophet who writes those extraordinary readings we have all through Advent. This is the people that have walked in darkness and have seen a great light. And every valley and hill shall be made low and filled in, and there will be a highway for our God. And so he's not lacking in hope and joy, even though for the most part what Isaiah does is rejected and not received and not honored and not sanctified. That doesn't minimize the call. The call is there. And the call is there for each and every one of us all the time. Minimally from our baptism, when we were anointed priest, prophet, and king, but in so many other ways, in the ways in which Jeremiah will say in his call, that you knew me in the womb, that I was knitted in the womb and called by God from the moment of creation. These are not just comments for Isaiah and Jeremiah. They are truths for us. That we have been called, and we are the people that are continually purified and sanctified. And what will our response be? So we hear in the clipping here, send me, here I am. Can you and I say that this day? Send me. Or, no, it's too hard. Or in some of the other prophets, I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too this, it's too that, it's too this. We're really, really good at figuring out reasons why we can condition it. As we know so profoundly, the biggest thing is God's unconditional love. And so there is no reason for us not to trust, to revel, and believe that we are called and sent, and that the Lord will provide what we need. It may not be what we want. It may not even be close to what we want. It may look really bad. But we're stuck with it. Or are we empowered by it rather than stuck? Empowered to say, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ is real. And we sit in it, we stand in it, we pray in it, we rejoice in it. And if you do, then the call is clear. And the call is gift. Peter. Poor Peter. It's interesting in the Gospel of Luke, this is not the first encounter, so this isn't the first call. This is the movement into mission now. And so I'd like to think, and somehow, that our faith is based just a little more than on abundance of fish. He sees all the fish, and in seeing all the fish, oh, now I know I'm a sinful man, please leave me. we all recognize the reality of our sin. And you know, sin in its healthy sense is good. You don't hear that much, do you? Sin in its healthy sense is good because it allows us to know our brokenness and our need for God's care and mercy and compassion, and to be open to it and receive it. We all know the experience of somebody who doesn't have our experience. So it was a couple years ago, and I nearly broke an ankle. When I went to the doctors, he was not helpful. He thought it was like, I can't believe you're here for this, blah, 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 and just gave me lots of grief. So I don't know, it was about a year later, and I came back to him, and he's like this. And I said, oh, what happened? Oh my gosh, I really turned my ankle. Boy, did the compassion and mercy flow then. So maybe we're all called to break an ankle from time to time. But it's precisely that experience of entering into the experience, the pain, the brokenness of another that allows us empathy, that allows us to know the reality that we believe and we profess, as Paul says, I preached, I proclaimed, and in it you stand, and in it you believe. It's more than invitation. It's more than proclamation. It is true gift. And it is given to us as church each and every day. My third point, the call to sanctity. I think we often think of Teresa and Therese, to use the two that are behind us, of course, and John of the Cross. I don't want to forget John. So at least we've got a few of the Carmelites first, of course. And Ignatius and Francis Xavier, so I get to pick them. And St. Matthew, of course. And we think of these folks, and we're like, I can't do what they do. I got news for you. You're not supposed to. That's the point of it. Thomas Merton is so clear that in being a saint, what is required is exactly what we heard in Paul's letter. I am what I am with my brokenness, and now I'm empowered to do something. You are not empowered right now, I don't think anybody in this room, to go to Calcutta and deal with those folks. That's not your call to sanctity. It was Mother Teresa's call to sanctity, but it's not yours. That doesn't mean you don't have a call to sanctity, but it's not that one. And maybe the call to sanctity isn't for each and every one of us to be whatever saint you choose to pick. That doesn't minimize the call to each of us to sanctity. So at the risk of having said that, I will do two quick quotes from Mother Teresa. Because they're applicable in our experience, not just on the streets of Calcutta. The first you may well know, never be afraid to do little things with great love. This is possible in your day today. It's possible even here before you leave today. And it comes just as the other things do, as call, as invitation, and ultimately as grace. The other wonderful story is when she was being interviewed, and the reporter, was actually Malcolm Muggeridge, said to her, you know, what you do in Calcutta is just stupid. You pick up these people who are dying, they die in 12 hours, and the spot where you pick them up is now filled with someone else. And you do it again and again and again. There's endless people dying. And so what you've done has no real value in the end at all. And so, of course, you know you have this little Albanian woman who's basically dressed in a towel. And she looks at him and in great confidence says, I am not called to be successful, but I am called to be faithful. You may or may not be called to be successful, but you are all called to be faithful. And it is possible. It's possible for each and every one of us. And we all know, if you've read some of other Mother Teresa's writings, for decades she had no experience of God at all. She was in the desert wasteland. She had no affective encounter with Christ at all, and so her faith is even greater when we know that. People said, oh, it was awful, they published that stuff, they shouldn't have done that. Why? Tells us of her human experience and brokenness that allowed her the empathy to do what she did. And so now the question is for you and I. What is the call, universal call to sanctity today? I have no doubt that it is a call to be people of hope and people of joy. Everything in the world tells us something different. So we see politicians in blackface and racism, and it breaks our hearts. And we have people at our borders, men and women and children, dying of hunger, waiting for months to be told no. And it breaks our hearts. And you can continue down the list, and we look at the murder rates in the city of Baltimore, on track, I'm sure, to get another 300. And it breaks our hearts. And we listen to politicians who lie on both sides and say whatever they want because of power. And it breaks our hearts. And we can continue down the list to whatever thing you want to look at. And so, it's all messed up. So we could look at the sex scandal and the covering up in the church. We could look at the inability of the church to value the gifts of women and the talents that they bring. You can keep going and going and going. That doesn't change our call. It didn't change Isaiah's call. It didn't change Peter's call. The call is still real. To say, we know and we experience and are transformed by the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And because of that, we are filled with joy. And we are filled with hope. And there'll be times when we don't feel it and we don't like it and I don't want to be that person. Be it anyway. Be it anyway. That's the voice the world needs here. The other voices are around us. And we need to work against them most certainly. But we don't want that to be the only voice. I'm tired of Fox. I'm tired of CNN. I'm tired of all of it. Turn it off and be a person of hope and joy. It is possible today. Because in here, we know the truth. And we will gather at this table with our brokenness and our sin and all that burdens us, and it will be transformed with that encounter with Jesus Christ into his body and blood and into hope for us. If you can just be the people of hope and be the people of joy, then I can guarantee you there will be an abundance of fish.